I think we are now live. Welcome to another CHRO South Africa webinar. My name is Sungulan Kabinde, and I'm the community manager at CHRO South Africa. It's been a while since we've had one of these, and I'm really looking forward to an impactful conversation around AI and remote work and how it's impacted global recruitment strategies. Please get involved in the chat. Introduce yourself, where you're from, why this is an appealing topic for you, and just make sure you stay engaged. We have a very different format today, whereby for the lion's share of the conversation, we're going to be engaging with the audience. There'll be a lot more Q&A than usual. I think in the past we've had a lot of questions coming in and not enough time to address all of them, but that won't be the case today. So please be as engaged as possible throughout the conversation. Now, to introduce the topic, we're talking about the impact of AI and remote work in a post-COVID environment. You know, what the pandemic did was it accelerated the shift towards remote working and highlighted the importance of global talent acquisition. With more companies adopting remote and hybrid work models, the need to recruit globally has become even more pronounced, and organizations have started to tap into a wider pool of candidates to leverage the diverse skill sets and to drive innovation and growth. Furthermore, AI has the potential to transform the global recruitment strategies of organizations by making them more efficient, objective, and data-driven. By leveraging AI-powered tools and platforms, HR professionals can identify and engage with potential candidates more effectively, helping them to attract and retain talent from around the world. And obviously, with remote working, that is no longer something that is a nice to have when you're looking at your employee value proposition, but something that employees are demanding. So that is another kind of element of the recruitment process that employers have to take into account. Before we kick off, I'm just going to introduce our amazing panel, and your eyes are not deceiving you there. Lulu, who was supposed to join the panel, has fallen ill with COVID and had to step out. And we wish her all the best in her recovery. In the meantime, we have a very capable stand-in in Amy Roy, who is the Vice President of Talent at Atlas HXM. We also have Stembiso Phakati, who is the Director of Human Capital at Deloitte Africa. And last but certainly not least, we have Selo Govender, who is the People Executive for Talent, Learning and Development at Discovery. Thank you all for joining this conversation. Before we kick on to the panel discussion, Amy has prepared a presentation just to set the scene, to frame the conversation for us. Let us know what are the moving parts and things to take into account when it comes to global recruitment. What are the factors that play in the global talent market and things that we need to be aware of as we engage on the conversation we're about to have. So over to you, Lulu. Amy, apologies. I'm going to switch off stop sharing first of all, and then we can all turn off our cameras, let you do your thing, and then we can all come back to discuss what you've shared. Like I said, please get involved in the chat. The chat is going to be driving the lion's share of the conversation today. Over to you, Amy.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. I'm sorry Lulu is ill, but I'm excited to join you today to talk about this topic. I think it's really important and relevant as we think about the role of human resources and how we think about our talent and opening up the borders between our organizations. And so, when we talk about this topic, one of the things that has come up is around boundaryless recruitment. And some of you may think of that as remote recruitment. I think remote recruitment and boundary lists have slightly different meanings, although we're really talking about the same thing, which is that we're not together in the same physical office. The reason why I say that I think they're two different things is I think historically when we've thought about remote, we've thought about them not necessarily in our office, but we have thought about them in our same country or our same locality or something that has the same type of tax jurisdictions. And where we're really seeing boundaryless recruiting is the idea that we don't care where people could be as they're doing their work, whether they're in their home, which is down the street from where we might have had our office, or if they're, sitting in the United States like I am today, that they are able to work wherever they are. And that's because of technology. It's also because of vendors who can help organizations find talent in other places, or even if not, they're able to pay them or think about how we bring on talent differently. And when we think about that, that plays into all of the parts of talent acquisition: how we source, how we interview, how we evaluate, even how we get them the paperwork that they need to complete to onboard them. All of those different components play a part. And when we think about utilizing technology in this way, we have to think about what's most important for our business and how we can do all of those pieces, not just one piece or the other. I think when we first went to COVID, everybody talked about virtual interviewing, and then there was a lot about virtual onboarding. But really, as we think about this virtual workforce, we have to think about all of the pieces. And when we think about that, we think about the tools that are used through video conferencing, email, or really any online communication. So really even how we chat with each other and think about how we can use instant messaging tools. Now, COVID has taught us that people can work anywhere. We all were affected by the shutdown, and we learned that people can get their jobs done, even though we had, that there are some trade-offs when we take that model. But if they can work anywhere, then they can live anywhere. And I don't know if you've experienced it, but one of the things that we're seeing is even this idea of digital nomad, that people don't live anywhere, that they can go from one spot to the next spot and think about their work wherever they are. And that they're no longer, not only are they not tied to an office anymore, they're not even tied to a home address. And so when we think about boundaryless recruiting, how we think about that and how we can use it, why we would use it, why wouldn't we go back to being in an office now that we can? One of the things that, sorry about that, my slide just pause for a moment, is that we can go into new markets. And where we may have had limitations with finding the right, for example, tech talent, when we open up those borders, we can find new talent in areas where we never thought to look in the first place. The second piece of that related to finding new talent is we can often maybe even hire them at a different cost point that it might have cost us before. So in terms of being in, where I am in New York City, but labor is quite expensive. And by going into new markets allows us to think about that as well. As we think about this too, I think the remote work is something people expect. I'm looking at the chat and I see some of you have been working remote for a number of years. I have as well. I started working remote in 2010. So when the pandemic came, it wasn't a change for me, but it was for a lot of people. And what a lot of people found is that they like it. And, I think, again, there's pluses and minuses, and we could argue those, all day and talk about what happens in those scenarios. But a lot of people like it and they don't want to go back. I can't tell you how many candidates I speak to who say, one of the reasons why I'm interested in joining your organization is so that I can work remotely because I've done it and now I like it. The other piece is that it can improve our diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging efforts. when we can look at a wider range of candidates, we can get a lot of different people into our organizations, where in some places that may have been challenging. And, as we think about global recruitment, one of the things that we used to have to do is go to physical job fairs. And that costs money, it costs time, it costs resources, and we no longer are tied down to that. And one of the things that we've also seen is social media recruiting, finding platforms that allow people to find us, really help us drive our brand. I remember the days where we used to have to put ads in magazines, paper magazines, for those of you who remember those, or even newspapers. And now we do it on social media. And there's a lot of different social media platforms. And, the face of how recruitment looks has certainly changed because of those. People get information at their fingertips. Access to the candidate, seeing your brand, who you are, what you have open, who you are as an organization is really critical in terms of making sure that they can see you as well as know what's going on. Now, why would you use it? Well, you can reach faster. It reaches a really broad talent pool. People around the world are connected to these platforms. Again, can help with the diversity because different people are seeing your ads. But most importantly, it really does allow you to highlight your brand in a way that you never could before. Social events, sure, but what do you want to get across about your culture and even what jobs you have? So we all, think about LinkedIn as a way to have, jobs posted and share about organizations. LinkedIn's kind of come out to be like the who you know of networking in the work world. But don't discount some of the other social medias, and there's just a few of them listed here. But the reality is that different demographics look at different sites more frequently. And so that might make you see some diversity in hiring different age groups. It also some of these have specific networks for job posting. I was on Instagram and searched South African jobs, and there's a number of job boards that are out there that are posting different roles that are available in South Africa. Now, when I took a look, most of them were, on the lower end of pay scale, but it does give you another vehicle to think about what you're doing and how you're doing it. And again, if nothing else, really just get your name out. So if you're not thinking, in terms of utilizing these tools, this might be some place to start. Again, some of this all comes down to where in your hiring process do you need some help? Are you having trouble bringing people into the funnel? Are people not aware of your brand as an employer? This could be a really great place to start. Now, there's lots of data and automation tools that are out there, and if you use them, they can help streamline your workforce, your work processes. They can help you reduce bias because the tools are taking away some of the human element that all come with unconscious biases. They can help you improve your decision making because they give you predictive insights, as well as just automating some of the time-consuming automated tasks. The one that comes to mind for me that was a real challenge for our organization was getting candidates in the tech field scheduled fast enough. The organization I was working for had a panel process. It required a number of players internally to be part of the interview process, and finding blocks of time for candidates to come in was a scheduling nightmare. And by putting in a technology to automate that, allowed for the candidate at their time zone to be able to schedule what made sense for them. And it took away, what a person having to get involved in some of those scheduling, including follow-ups, reminders, all of the things that we've used in the past had to do manually. From an automation perspective, it can help drive your screening, your shortlisting. There are tools that allow you to, search through your resumes or the people who've applied and serve up who the logic thinks might be the best candidates to take a look at first. Are they making decisions? No, you are still making the decisions. But when you put an ad out and you get hundreds of resumes, that takes a while to go through them all. And by having a helper look for some keywords could be a really valuable way of getting through that funnel. So if you think about the process and recruitment, the first one is getting people interested. And so that's where those social media tools can help. The second one is, now that you've got all of these resumes, how do you get through them? Not only quickly, but also in an unbiased way. So tools to take names off of resumes, for example, can help remove those biases so that you're truly looking at the candidate for what's there on paper versus anything that might come to mind in terms of where you see their name or their location or all the other things that could bias anyone in the hiring process, unconsciously, of course. The other place that we've seen changes is how we communicate with candidates. Texting is one. Again, be cognizant of any data privacy laws in the countries that you're hiring in, because there are rules with opting in or opting out. So be cognizant of that. But people, candidates now rely on texting, especially, if you're working with certain generations of people, rely on that more than others. Chatbots is another one, allowing someone to come to your careers page and have them interact with the chatbot, where the chatbot says, hey, I see you've applied for this job. You might be interested in this job as well. That is another way where it can help you get your brand out or words out for candidates who may not be aware. And again, eliminate some of that time spent. And then ultimately, utilizing the data as you're going through your processes. So how many candidates are coming in? Where are they coming in from? Is it worth investing my time in this source, going forward, because I get the most candidates? Are the candidates that I'm getting, though, are they converting into hires? Because it's great that we had 500 applications, 500 candidates come in, but if we never hire anyone from that source, then we're wasting our time going through all 500. So, when I think about this process, I would say the piece to really be aware of is, where in your funnel or in the hiring process do you need help? And then select the tools that are the most important. We've covered some of these before in terms of the recruitment, the data-driven recruitment. The other place in data-driven recruitment is around assessments, candidate assessments, tools that might help you identify whether or not this is a good fit. Strengths Finder, to find the strengths that you need for a role. Predictive Index is another one where you can identify, hey, we need this type of person. Does this person match? And again, be cognizant of country laws, of what is allowed to be done, how you utilize those tools, and what you may need to share back with the candidate. I want to make sure that we don't just say go use these things and we're not being cognizant of laws, other things. And I'll, before we move into the next part of our session, I'll just remind you, data privacy comes up. Be aware of requirements. Make sure that what you're doing. Or retaining data in the right way, that you're keeping it safe and private. Make sure that you have tools to, protect yourself from false applicants, any kind of, place where people can get into your systems or access information they shouldn't have. And again, engage your technology team in these decisions. There's a lot of technology out there, more than we've ever seen before. And as you go through the process, bring your technology partners in so that you can make sure that, that you're protecting your organization. With that, I'm going to stop sharing and pass it over so that we can move on to our next part of our presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Amy. And on that note, I'd like to welcome our panelists back, and we can start to engage on everything that you've shared thus far. Before we get into that, I do have a poll that I'd like you to all participate in. And it's with regard to AI recruitment. The question is, to what extent have you incorporated AI into your recruitment process? And we're just trying to get a sense of where everybody on the call is with regard to this topic. While we wait for your answers, Tay, what's Deloitte's approach to AI recruitment currently?
Thanks, Sungula. We focus on a number of approaches around AI recruitment, but we find that adaptive AI is playing a big role on the process of recruitment, because the data shows us that a lot of organizations spend a lot of time throughout the candidate selection, shortlisting, interviewing, even onboarding, and let alone onboarding, even training employees to become more productive at the workplace. And that process can take weeks to months. So we find that adaptive tools like AI actually help organizations fast track the process, and also make use of other data sources to ensure that the screening is seamless. And also by leveraging natural language processing and machine learning tools, organizations can actually quickly analyze and evaluate candidate profiles, look at their CVs, identify the most relevant qualifications needed, skills, experiences that match the job requirements. We are already using it at Deloitte, and most of our clients are beginning to leverage on these tools. Also, we find that cognitive and adaptive AI helps reduce bias. In other words, because when human beings are doing candidate selection and shortlisting, there are biases that you may not even be aware of when you do the selection. So these unconscious bias sometimes unintentionally influence the recruitment decisions. So cognitive tools like AI can help minimize such biases by providing objective, data-driven approaches to candidate evaluation. And also by focusing on their specific qualifications and skills, these tools ensure that candidates are assessed fairly and based on their merits and nothing else. So thereby mitigating the impact on human biases. I hope that helps.
No, it does help. And we've had 60% of the people responding to the poll. I'm going to end it now and see the results. 3% have said we have invested heavily to transform the entire candidate experience. 29% say we have a few tools that have simplified the process. 20% have said I personally use free tools like ChatGPT, but we don't have anything provided by the business. And the lion's share, which is 40%, say we still do almost everything the old-fashioned way. And I'm worried, something to delve into there. And then 8% have said other. Please indicate if there's other. Let us know in the chat where are you in your stages of AI recruitment? Stay, comments on those results?
Quite interesting. I think it's a mix. It's a mix. I mean, it depends on a number of things. I mean, some organizations have got mature processes around talent selection, and some are still using manual processes. It's difficult to leapfrog into this kind of AI augmentation when your manual processes are not mature. So I think the data set that you've just read out is testament to the fact that different organizations are at a very different life cycle, and their maturity levels are also very different.
Okay, Selo, before I come to you, do you have any comments on the poll results?
I think, yeah, similar to what Esther was sharing. We're seeing a lot more focus on the introduction of these innovative practices within our full people experience value chain. So to the point, is not just on the recruitment side, where you have to deal with high volume recruitment. And I think that's one of the things I'll be sharing as well, where you can use this quite innovatively, and from an efficiency perspective, it will help, when you have high volume recruitment, especially the machine learning functionality that the technology has. But yeah, I guess even throughout, from a learning and development perspective, as well as then from a career growth and development perspective, we currently implemented the learning experience platform within Discovery, which is aimed to connect our people to high quality premium content in the flow of work. And that makes use of algorithm-based technology. So based on your profile, it will match you to the content, that you've obviously have an interest in, and also based on your the skills you've articulated. And so we're seeing a great uptake of that and experimenting with the talent marketplace at the moment. So there too, it's about matching opportunities to individuals based on their skills profile and their interests. So we're seeing an advent of, more introduction of more of these innovative technologies, just based on where our employees are in terms of their expectations and the experience that they're looking for.
And what's the Discovery's kind of approach to talent acquisition post-pandemic now?
So interestingly, within the Southern Hemisphere, I think we experiencing the residual effects of the Great Resignation. And so now at the moment, I think within financial services, we're seeing quite a high demand for critical skills, as well as then, in a very volatile, competitive market, we're seeing, a lot of movement of our critical and scarce skills. And so, we've had to actually become quite innovative in the approach that we're taking. And, from an attraction and EVP value proposition and retention perspective, what we've had to do is to actually reimagine our solutions and offerings, and, conducted a full research study in terms of, what our people, our candidates, people that rejected us, what they think about, the solutions. We actually ran a poll on LinkedIn. You would have, those of you that participated would have seen that the LinkedIn poll. And I think, this was really important in informing then, the solutions that we've defined going forward. So we've taken a more human-centric approach and looking at personalizing the solutions that we offer from a retention perspective, because you have to first make sure that people are retained, because the retention will help you in terms of then the turnover. So just based on that, it's, equipping our leaders with firstly understanding what all the offerings are in the organization and our people, just being more transparent about it, but also a bit more adaptable. So the Gartner survey, exit survey that was conducted, and we also participated in that, it indicated the top 3 reasons for people leaving organizations. Number 1, benefits. So benefits were highlighted there. I think it was 35% of people that said they leave for that reason. Number 2 was work-life integration. And wow, I think we all know people struggling at the moment with this in the post-COVID world. And number 3 was career growth and development. I think 30% of people said they leave because of this. So we've been quite intentional in then making sure that the solutions we're offering are catering for these needs. And typically, from a recruitment perspective, we definitely then are articulating, the full comprehensive solutions and offerings from a value proposition perspective to prospective candidates, and what they are able to, to have, as well as then our own people in the organization from a retention perspective. And one of the things, for example, is, the introduction of more agile, self-directed sort of solutions when it comes to, your career growth and development. So hence I mentioned to stay the introduction of a learning experience platform, talent marketplace, able to help people to learn and grow in the flow of work, aligned to their aspirations. So more personalized, but also making sure that it meets the business need. Because the sweet spot is if both the business need and the individual's aspirations are met. That's one of the things. And then I think something that's really been top of mind for us from an attraction perspective is really putting out authentic, lived experiences of our people, on all the attraction platforms. So letting our people, equipping them to share authentically, and honestly, what it is that they experience within the organization. And, remember, great people know great people. So you're going to have, a better sort of attraction if people, are actually listening to people that they trust and know. So I think this has been quite, one of the deliberate strategies that we've been using. And then, of course, like everybody else, we've introduced during this, during the pandemic, as well as post the pandemic, many digital solutions, to try and enhance the experience of the candidates, the recruiters, even the line managers, just to make sure that it's simple. And, one of the things that we actually were quite intentional around is, besides optimizing those processes and the systems, the thing that we introduced was this tools to enable the candidates to actually use video pre-screening. And so, they submit, instead of a CV, they submit a video application in terms of their experiences. And so we're able to then screen that. And you can actually screen very effectively if you have high volume. So that was one of the things we did. And the other portion of it, which is quite exciting, is we also introduced and reimagined our onboarding process, enabling it with technology. So, we're still very conscientious about making sure that if a new hire is coming into the organization, they have that human connection, because I think connection is really important to values, culture, and the organization, especially when somebody's coming in new. So we've been quite intentional around making sure that we enable it through technology and have a platform that we put in place, but we also then make sure that at those moments that matter, they have the human engagement to enable us to make that connection. So those are some of the things that we've introduced.
Sorry, I was on mute for a second there. Lovely. Thank you very much, Selo. And then before we get to the actual questions, Amy, I'd like to find out what are maybe some of the other areas around the ubiquity of remote working that have impacted the global talent market that we haven't considered thus far.
Yeah, thanks. And I just want to say to Selo, I agree with you 100%. Thinking about our current talent is equally as important as we think about new talent and how we can utilize the people we have to move up within the organization and give them that career pathing for retention. So kudos to you for putting in that type of technology to help people find those roles. But to answer your question about the remote workplace, and I saw a question in the chat about culture and how do you keep that? When we move to a remote workplace, one of the things, and I'm sure for those of you who had the opportunity to work remote during COVID, you saw it, everything becomes much more deliberate. How we communicate, how we get in touch with each other, how we move what would be paperwork. Selo mentioned the onboarding process and how we move through our processes. We have to rethink all of those things when we're not in the same place. One of the things I would say is it does open up opportunities for other types of things. In my in a prior role, I had an organization that had 5 different offices, and everyone was office-based, but they were office-based in one of the 5 offices. And when we would run programs, the programs would be run at the office level. So each office would have their own activities going on. When we moved into the COVID world, we were able to run those activities across all of our offices. So while some things go away, other things come up, where you can now bring more cross-functional work and more cross-functional belonging to the organization in that remote environment. So that's one. I think we have to think about compensation. And as we look more globally, how do we look across and do the compensation programs that we have in place in this part of the world still resonate or work in other parts of the world? So I do think we have to look at that. There could be some cost savings, but there also could be some additional costs depending upon how we're looking. We have to look, when we look at the more global workplace, also holidays and how people manage all of their compliance. And this is not not a plug for Atlas, but what Atlas does is help employers who want to move into new markets and don't have offices in those markets be compliant and make sure that we can pay people in those new places, and make sure that we know that they're supported from the local governance. I saw local governments come up as well. And so we want to make sure that if we're moving into new markets, that we have those controls in place so that we can think about how we, apply what we're currently doing in our location to another location. As it relates to the question specifically that I saw about culture, I think there's, different organizations do require whether or not they can be remote or not. So for example, if I'm a food service business, it's difficult for me to serve your food from my house. I do need to be in person to be able to do that. But if I have an online app, maybe that technology person doesn't need to be in person. So I think that you have to look at the work that's being done, see what is, what's the rationale for keeping it in-house or offsite to see if it can work. But more importantly, is the talent pool there? I think that as you look at your hiring processes, if you're not finding the right talent in your physical location, or you're not finding talent who wants to come into an office, that starts to open up the door for those conversations so that you can get the jobs filled with the right people to really drive your business forward.
Thank you. We're now entering the Q&A part. So if any questions come up, please get involved. So far, we've already had one question from Dolores Mashishi, who is the MD at DSM Advisory, is a friend of the community. Dolores says, I'm all for remote working. Once enabled, it is the best efficient way to work. But she's always wondered how AI recruiting takes place in the context of high unemployment in South Africa, org value propositions, as well as culture integration. I think we've touched on the culture one, and I think that's going to be a recurring theme when it comes to the remote working piece. Anybody want to take that on the comment of unemployment? Steve?
Yeah, I can try. I think first off, the unemployment conundrum is what I see. I mean, as you know, Sungula, I also work part-time at VETS and other higher learning institutions. What we find that young people today do not want to learn skills that utilize their hands. In other words, we all want to obtain formal education. I was telling my students last week that by the time you finish a degree, the knowledge you're acquiring here will be irrelevant because the world is turning so quickly and so rapidly. So while you're going through formal education, through a higher learning process, find opportunities to learn something that you can trade in society now. And we've got all kinds of online learning platforms that are available for free, YouTube channels that you can use to learn a skill. And as long as that skill is tradable and it is in demand and someone is willing to pay for it, you should do it. And while you're pursuing a formal education. The other thing that I want to echo from Amy and Selo is that it is more expensive to focus your time and effort on recruitment as opposed to retention. What we find is that if you create a situation of a revolving door in a company, you are bleeding money and you are wasting your energy and you're spending money fruitlessly almost. So what we find is that, and what we say to our clients is that focus on retention. You're spending less energy, you're spending less money and less effort. And there are all kinds of AI tools that are available to understand what makes people stay, what makes people want to stay, and what makes people want to wake up and come to your organization. If you can assess those kinds of factors, elements, and data points, why people stay, you're not going to have spend much money employing adaptive tools to recruit and onboard. And by the way, And when you focus on recruitment, there is a huge amount of loss of institutional memory, IP, as people leave the organization. And by the way, when people leave the organization and they are upset, they do not become your good brand ambassadors wherever they go. So you are not only losing a skill or losing a talent, you are losing someone who's grumpy, who's unhappy, who's going to say bad things about your enterprise or company. So there's all kinds of negative factors of creating a revolving door and not focusing on internal employees and understanding what makes them want to stay and what makes them want to come up and work for you and work with you. In fact, lastly, our data from the HC Trends report that we've recently released indicates that 2 out of 5 millennials and Gen Zs would leave a company even if there wasn't a job lined up for them outside. And you need to think about that. So if 2 out of 5 young people are willing to leave because they are unhappy without even another job in the market, that is testament to the fact that their demand expectations are becoming more prevalent in the workplace. And that is important to think about.
If I could chime in on that one, I think what's really interesting about that is getting that voice of the employee. And we didn't talk about this as a tool, but there are lots of survey tools out there that can help you capture that voice of the employee, be able to ask questions like, do you plan to see yourself here in 12 months or 18 months? And what are your feelings about our culture? What would be beneficial for you as wellness? Looking at the chat on some of the things that are coming up. What does wellness mean to you? Because that means a lot of things to different people. And thinking about, as you approach technology, even if we take talent acquisition or talent management out, getting that voice and using the technology platforms that are out there to give you the analytics to help you know where to go so you don't have to guess, I think are really critical as we look at this remote workforce and find out what people are thinking.
Agreed, Amy. And I think, when I was sharing earlier about that personalized approach that we've taken, it's exactly to the point Stay is mentioning. So having, and I think this is the challenge to all organizations, that leaders need to have the conversations. So those retention conversations, I know I'm calling it that, or stay conversations. So where you directly asking people those questions. And, what will make you stay? What will make you leave? What is it that you're aspiring towards? How can we meet, these needs that you have? Even some of the more personalized discussions, in terms of benefits and compensation. And I think if we actually challenge ourselves to equip our leaders to be able to have these conversations. So we, as I mentioned, we actually having masterclasses at the moment, run by our talent team with the respective subject matter experts of the pillars from a value proposition perspective, equipping leaders to have these conversations, equipping HR teams in the business to be able to support leaders with these conversations. So it's really I'll call it a traditional approach, because you're having this conversation, but it's with the vision that this is going to support you in terms of not having to have that revolving door. And the other piece, I think, which was mentioned, around, the high unemployment rate in South Africa, and what do you do to cater for that? In our organization, we take, we're taking a different approach in that, you've got the enabling technology for those more professional type of roles that you're offering, and where people are able to have access to engage with you. But we actually quite intentional around also making sure that we provide access to people to be able to engage with us, so apply, and also engage from a recruitment perspective in person for like the operational rules. So we will allow for that to take place, because we do understand the needs and context of our country. And for example, physically, we still allow people to come through, and we still do interviews where people don't have that access to the technology, in physically meeting us. And, I might be old school like that, but, it's really great to have in-person engagements you get to meet and engage with a person and understand them from a human perspective. So we've done that to cater for the challenges people might have from a South African context, unemployment perspective.
Thank you. I got cut off there for some reason. I had a laptop malfunction, but I'm back. I don't know if this was tackled in my short absence, but there's a question around culture is a recurring one. And something that I've heard from a number of HR leaders that I've spoken to is that it's very tricky with remote work, because while many employees who have established families or have a good track record in their career would prefer to just get on with it from home, people entering the workplace, graduates and people at the early stages of their careers and new hires benefit quite significantly from an office environment and being present, because that's where you create your relationships with your colleagues and you get a sense of what kind of organization you're working in. And with remote working, you almost lose that entirely. So, and I imagine that that's where the whole culture piece is a real big factor when it comes to remote working, especially with the new hires and the young people joining the organizations who don't have families that they would prefer to spend most of their day looking after or seeing. So what are the solutions to that, Amy?
You know, I'm kind of chuckling to myself. I have a 22-year-old who just joined the workforce, having just finished university, and he is in an organization that is based in London, and he is working in the United States. So he is in that boat of those people who are in that younger population without other coworkers. I think the first step as it relates to culture is to first evaluate your culture as it exists without remote work. What works? How do things happen? How do people become immersed in that culture if it's office-based? And I'm not talking about parties or lunches or things along those lines, although those are certainly important for creating feelings of belonging. But how is it working within the office? And then think about how that can then transition to include your remote workers. I think I think there's a number of different scenarios. There's the scenario where everyone is remote in an organization, and that situation makes everything become much more deliberate. And then there's the scenario where you've got people who are hybrid, may come in a few days a week. That changes things a little bit, and some days they work from home. And then there's the organizations that have some people fully remote and some people fully in the office. And I personally believe that's the most difficult scenario, because now you're balancing two different types of groups of people. Whatever you decide to do, I think it comes back to what are the values of the organization, what is important to people, why did they join in the first place, and are you delivering on those things? And it does take effort. It does take more effort for belonging. It does take more effort for feeling connected. What I mean by effort is, instead of me just passing you in the hallway and saying, how was your weekend? I actually have to send you a message to say, how was your weekend? And I think when someone's out of sight, they're often out of mind. And it comes down to training both the employee on what the expectations are for remote and how they stay in contact, and how they change the manager, who is ever responsible for training that person, who may have been sitting next to them prior and gotten everything through osmosis, and now needs to be more deliberate in those conversations. So I think it's shifting our mindset. It's thinking about what makes us special in the first place. So I mentioned what's your value proposition, and then how can you think about that value proposition if you're not physically together? If the only value is we have great snacks in our lunchroom, then we have to think differently about the other things that we provide to employees, or we need to start mailing snacks. So we have to start thinking about that and what really brings it in. And that's where that voice of the employee comes in. Even, things like reviews of your company, what's great and what's not great, can really help you think about how does that translate. So I was joking about the snacks, but I will tell you, in an organization I worked for, where we had some people in the office and some people who did not, we sent them, for the people who were remote, if we were bringing into the office, we sent them vouchers to go order food to their home. So they still felt connected. And if we were having a lunch in the office, we would have the camera up for a team meeting so that person could be included. So you don't have to get away from those things entirely. You just have to think about them a little bit differently.
Lovely.
Yeah.
From Mars, any further comments there?
I just wanted to add, Sungula, that I agree with Amy. The role of the office has shifted post-COVID, and I think actually not long ago I published an article around the hybrid work models and the role of the office. So the workplace is no longer a place; it's just an input to the work. So the where work gets done should be dictated by the nature of the work, and there's various ways of creating human connections. Nothing can replace human connections, but we have seen that post-COVID, people find their own social ways to create connections. It does not have to be at the office. Lastly, I always say to my clients, be intentional and deliberate about what you're going to do when you're at the office, because what you can do at home, you should do at home, especially for knowledge workers. If you need a brain, a laptop, and an internet connection, you can work literally anywhere. So be intentional and deliberate about the things you're going to do at the office, whether it's discussions, it's unpacking things, collaboration, brainstorming, or just meeting socially. If you're going to come to the office to be stuck on your laptops on Zoom calls like this one, it's probably counterproductive. And I always say to my colleagues, do your work wherever you feel productive. So if you're productive at home, and let it be. So I think that we sometimes hide behind a social connection to come to the office, and yet we hide away behind headphones and screens, and we never really connect. So I think the role of the office has to be intentional, and it's not just a place, it has to play a role compared to what we've done before. Thanks.
I think your sentiments are echoed by Pindi Langa Kelly, who says it's important to redefine the employee experience. Being in the office doesn't necessarily mean you'll achieve the desired culture. Whether you're in the office, hybrid or remote, more effort has to be given in really unpacking what experience you want your employees to have, which I think that's a little bit of what everybody is saying here, is that it's more about what experience you want and how you will deliver that experience, as opposed to come to the office and be a part of the culture. We're not really defining what that means exactly.
Angula, maybe to chime in there, we've been quite intentional around, doing some research with our employees in terms of those needs. And actually then we did some persona-based, I think you all are doing that as well, sketching journeys based on these different personas in the organization and what their needs are. And to Steve's point, it's being intentional about those moments that matter to those different target populations, and then creating the experiences like the collaboration, the problem solving. Once you have that insight or the data around why do people want to actually come together, and how do you make or maximize then, that experience for them when they are together. So it's not just for the sake of doing it. And from a culture perspective, what we found with that research is that our more junior employees, that have just started in their careers, actually had the need for the connection. So they wanted the connection with the more tenured, experienced, employees in the organization, so that they could learn. So they actually raised their hands to say, we actually want this. So, we can't generalize and say, the younger generation just want the tech, because they actually wanted that connection, coaching, mentorship, opportunity to engage with experienced leaders. Thought I'll share that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Another question, which is going back to AI. I think it was Amaris Buckham who says AI is able to mitigate a barrier to execution in selection and recruitment, such as unconscious bias and so forth. But what are some of the limitations or things to watch out for when leveraging AI and tools in the recruitment process?
Yeah, I actually saw that question.
Okay.
I was hoping someone was going to answer. Of course, there are limitations with any technology. Remember, it's human beings that program machines. It's not another machine programming another machine. So if that person that's programming or developing algorithms in a machine has bias, unconscious or conscious, and that is going to be the result. So AI is not perfect because it's data that is fed into the machines and it's fed by human beings. So there has to be a human touch, of course, throughout the recruitment process, looking for loopholes and looking for those gaps. But what I do find is that if you use cognitive AI to do onboarding, recruitment, selection, and those kinds of things, 80% of the time is saved just by using technology. Of course, by the time you get to interviewing, I saw there was a question about, yeah, I think we should still have human touch during interviewing because you want to meet the person, you want to shake their hand, you want to see how they look like in a full body structure, not just on a shoulder on a screen. So it's not just at interview level, but I think we need to find a way to accept that using cognitive and adaptive AI is going to fast track the process, and it's going to have less bias, and also it's going to save you a lot of money at the end of the day. So of course, the human element is always going to be needed at some point, especially during the interviewing process.
Thank you. There's a question here about wellness from Ashraf Patel saying, health and wellness is one of the key challenges in the post-COVID hybrid world of work. What are the new forms of well-being programs to cope with a brave new world of work, especially around workplace alienation, which speaks to some of the themes around remote working? Sela, you're from Discovery, and health-wise, you guys are like the leaders. So what are organizations doing wellness-wise in a remote environment? You're on mute.
Just in terms of, what we are doing, as well as some of the other organizations, I think it's really making sure that our employees have a full comprehensive understanding of all of the offerings, from a well-being perspective. And what we are finding, it's not only about the mental well-being. So I think it's not only about the mental wellness, mental well-being. We're also seeing that, you need to provide support and solutions when it comes to, and especially within this current context that we are in South Africa. So I'll speak to that. We also having to provide support from a financial well-being perspective, because if you're having challenges from a financial well-being perspective, the consequences of that is that it leads to stress. It leads to wellness and mental well-being conditions because you're having this challenge. So offering more the full sort of plethora of offerings. So the financial well-being, physical well-being. I mean, Sankula, you know about us, and we're quite pedantic around our vitality and making sure that our people are healthy. So really focusing on employee health, physical health, financial health, emotional well-being health, and all of the offerings obviously constructed around that. And also through research with our people within the organization, we're quite conscientious in making sure that even during the pandemic, that all our people had access to all of the offerings, as well as then the facilities. We're conscientious in making sure our people do their assessments, annual or biannual, so their health assessments. Together with that, using the digital technology, we've got the prompts, to people to take those mental, financial, physical well-being assessments. So there's a lot that can be said, and I wish I had more time, but I've just shared sort of a snapshot around that.
All right. There's one or two questions we haven't been able to get to, and then, we've got like 1 minute before we have to wrap up. I'm just going to ask for the panelists to maybe give us a parting shot. If there's anything that sticks out in the question in the chat that you think we haven't addressed, you can give it a go. I see Jenny Strauss has said, please answer a question about the still very common occurrence of ghosting candidates by companies. This is after being interviewed or assessed. I think that's still very commonplace, and it speaks to the 40% of respondents who said we are still doing things the very old-fashioned way, and I'm worried. So in many cases, I think it's a result of just being totally behind on the way of recruiting. A lot of our organizations have these follow-up elements quite automated already, to the point where if you haven't heard from them, there's an automated message that you get that says your application was unsuccessful. So I think that's where that is at. And also your second question, I think you raised something about people being transparent in exit interviews. I don't know how transparent people have been in the past. I have to put my hand up and say I have not fully disclosed my reasons for leaving. But a better point is maybe around the stay interviews, which many of the panelists alluded to, which is find out why people want to stay or what would make them stay. A number of organizations are creating this culture of having stay interviews with their top talent to find out what are the reasons that will make you stay even longer and not even consider alternative offers from other organizations. So that's my 2 cents there. I hope that answers your questions, Jenny. Before we wrap up, just 1 minute closing remark from each of you. I'll start with you, Amy.
Yeah, I would say, if you're not doing anything, think about starting small. Start with one thing where you find you're having challenges, and start there, and that might then lead to a snowball. But do your research and make sure you get, what you really need.
Lovely, Stay.
Yeah, I agree with that. Also focus on optimizing and getting right into your basic processes. Don't rush to AI tools, technology before your basics are in place. If your manual process is not fully optimized, no technology is going to help you. Thank you.
Lovely, Selo.
From my side, whatever you do must be aligned to your culture, values, purpose, and what you want to achieve. So I think that's first and foremost. And then obviously, go after those quick wins. And like Stay said, and Amy, sometimes these things, they quick, they low-hanging fruit. So that you can actually address very quickly. And not everything can be solved through AI. You still need human engagement and interaction.
Thank you very much. On that note, I'd like to thank Selo, Amy, and Stembiso for joining us. I think it's been a very fruitful conversation. I hope that you learned something. I hope that there's something that you took away from this conversation that will enable you to change the way you do things or even improve the way you do things. And that's it from CHRO South Africa. I hope you have a great Wednesday further, and we will catch you next time. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
It's fine.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.